Okay, first of all, this is my game Parachute, and I load the game. This is how you play it. So, as you can see, the controls, you can sway left and right, having to avoid enemies in the air, which in this case are seagulls. Tapping space lets you do this flutter movement upwards to allow you to maneuver around enemies. And your goal is to get to the ground without hitting an enemy, like so. And that's the game. So it does have keyboard and mouse input. I don't have rounds or levels implemented. Frame rate is there. It is time-based motion as well, based on the frame rate. There is a pause zoom function. If I reload the page and I hit P, it pauses the game, as you can see. If I hit P again, it unpauses the game. If I open a new tab in Chrome and go back into it, it is paused and there's a countdown timer, and then it'll start up again. So there's that. You can also see that I have multiple sprites on the screen. There's 4 different enemies there. They may look similar, but there's actually 4 separate enemy classes. They're all seagulls, but there's seagull up, down, left and right, each with their own animation. Some of the sprites in the cycle, as you can see for the right and down ones, are actually picking up a wee bit of the sprite next to it, so that just requires tweaking in the code. Their behaviors include their cycle behavior. The parachute player as well also has a behavior set for cycling through animations, but for some reason I think I've set the same. I think it's the same image for the 3 animations for it. Currently there's just the score implementation. It allows you to it just counts up every time you hit the spacebar, but the idea is I was trying to get collision to work, but I couldn't figure out how to get collision working. So the idea is you start off on say 100, and if you hit a bird you lose 5, and your score when you reach the bottom is however the highest number that you've left, that there's meant to be a better score. Code structure. So this is my code. There's a couple of pages. This here is the main parachute.js file. So we have a constructor, which also includes other. There's actually other enemy sprites that I was trying to implement, but I settled on the 4 seagulls ones, which are those 4 there. I also have 4 different types of crow, individual soldier characters without the parachute, and also there's a plane character which would fly across the screen. I set up the cells for the planes. There's 2 types of planes, and the seagulls and the parachute, and put in the data for the seagulls and the parachute behavior. I set it up, but again I say it doesn't seem to be working properly. Then into the prototype, just the usual kind of functions to get my code working. This is the general structure anyway of the code. There's also then the HTML file, which again just has a canvas area, similar to the Snailbait one we used, and Sprite.js for sprites, and also the CSS page. The images, my sprite sheet. Oh, that's not how I want to open the sprite sheet. My sprite sheet looks like this. So as you can see, I've got my background is actually a tile set of this first image here, and then the bottom row of images is this second one. So you can see that in the code in parachute.js, in where I create my background, which is here. So I have draw background. So the first row, which is this here, corresponds to this image. So this image will be created twice, left and right. And then in the second row, again, it's the same image, left and right. Third row, left and right. Fourth row, left and right. And then finally the ground row, what I've called the ground row here, is actually this second image over here. And it's printed left and right. And that just gives the effect in the game that when you, if I restart the game again, if you notice when you are floating down and avoiding the seagulls, the background stitches seamlessly, but then also stitches into this ground one, which also stops right there. The other thing is, if you notice, when you get to the edge, it automatically bounces you off, but when you get to the bottom, the offset actually just freezes at 0 because you want the player to land, not bounce back up. And that was made in the background offset function, which is here. So in here I've said that I've had to create for this free motion movement, I've had to create of x direction velocity, a y direction velocity, an offset x and an offset y, and that allows me to set up separately what the different offsets do. In this case, when the x offset is greater than or less than 0 or greater than the width, you flip the background velocity sideways, so you always bounce off the walls, whereas the background offset y actually just sets you to be at that location, which is the height of the 5 backgrounds stacked on top of each other, minus 1000, which just happens to be the position that I want the player character to be standing on. Similar work was put into the set player offset and also into set sprite offset using the x and y values. My window event listeners use, I'm using the left arrow key, the right arrow key, not the up and down arrows. I was using them for debug early on, being able to just like float anywhere on the screen just to see what was going on, but I've switched to using the space key to run a function that I call up, and this function up down just sets the y velocity to be a variable I've set to be gravity. The background velocity is gravity, and then the player velocity is minus gravity multiplied by 0.8. So that's it relative to the background. So that's how it scrolls at a slightly different speed. But the up function does it slightly differently. So again, the background velocity and the player velocity are set differently, going upwards. But then I set a timeout for half a second, 500 milliseconds, and then I reset back to the down values. And this gives the effect of where I'm trying to make an effect as if the parachute is getting a gust of wind up and then falling down again. So as you can see there, it pops up and then it falls down itself, like that. The other things I did with the event listeners was for moving left and right, I have an event listener for key down on left, which activates my function left, which just moves left, and the same for right with right. But I also have a key up listener, which I'm just setting the background velocity to be 0 on both of these, which allows me to, when I let go, it stops moving. So it lets the player have a little bit more accurate movement than, say, just tapping it and it going flying for miles. So I let go there and it stops moving and lets you like squeeze in between the birds. version control. For version control, I've used Bitbucket as suggested. Shut that up now. Using Bitbucket here, I created quite a lot of commits. Just adding different functionality and fixing functionality. A lot of my things that I was trying to get working were breaking, and then I would have to update them and fix the code. But most of my commits are working, and the final version is working code. On top of that, I think that's all. Yeah, so I'll just show you the game once more, but that's it, really.